Catal Hoyuk is one of the most significant sites of the Neolithic era. It was a large city of somewhere between 3,500 to 8,000 people or so, so a significant population at a time where cities were pretty much non-existent. So it was a relative metropolis. It's located in modern-day Turkey, southern modern-day Turkey, Anatolia. It is significant because of its layout. There are no streets in Catal Hoyuk. Instead, the buildings butt up one next to each other. It is covered with a sort of stucco made of lime covering clay bricks. The entrances to the individual dwellings are through the roof. There are no sort of central buildings that were meant for the mass populace. This is all domestic architecture. There are also no buildings that signify that there was a hierarchy. So meaning that there's no palaces, there's no larger dwellings. This seems to be an egalitarian society. At least that's what the architecture tells us. This is a prehistoric society, though. There is no writing, so we can't declare that completely, but the architecture tends to hint that there was no, at least, no sort of centralized power structure within this society. The lack of entrances on the walls tells us that this is a society that wanted to protect itself from its enemies. So in a way it served as kind of a fortress. The interior of the buildings were kept generally very neat and tidy. The insides of the rooms, just like the outside of the buildings, were covered in a sort of a lime-based stucco. There was typically a central hearth located in each of these structures, with smaller rooms adjacent to a central room for storage. Typically there were niches cut into the wall for sleeping. These rooms often tended to be decorated. There were paintings on the walls, which we'll see in a moment, but also there were clay sculptures that were stuck into the walls, usually depicting animals, very often depicting bulls. These probably had some sort of religious significance, and this hints at a religion that was practiced domestically and at home. Since we don't see any public buildings, this includes temples or churches or anything like that, this was a society that probably worshipped at home. Along with the paintings on the walls and sculptures placed on the walls, we also do find freestanding sculpture. It tends to be very, very small, so just like in the Paleolithic era, these tend to be portable objects. Although the vast majority of sculpture in Catal Hoyuk depicts animals, there are a significant amount of images, about 5% or so, of female figures, very similar to the fertility figures we saw from the Paleolithic era. Women who are depicted with the reproductive organs or parts of the anatomy associated with reproduction emphasized, so large breasts, bellies, that sort of thing. In this particular image, we see a woman seated, located between two lion heads. This is a typical image of power. This is something we call the heraldic stance or the heraldic posture, where you see a figure located in between or situated in between two powerful animal figures. This is a symbol of control. The figure is controlling the animals. So we see this concept of power over nature, and just in general, an image of power. Now, if this signifies that women had positions of power in the society of Catal Hoyuk, we don't know. We do know that there are sort of equal representations of men and women throughout. We have no evidence that there was that one gender controlled society over the other. But certainly these fertility figures did serve some sort of importance. Or this figure was found in the bottom of a grain storage barrel, which could have functioned as a way of ensuring a good harvest, since this is a fertility figure and it does relate to the idea of reproduction, fecundity, the ability to provide. As I said earlier, we see wall paintings, and the wall paintings here are significantly different than the cave paintings we see in the Paleolithic era. Neolithic paintings of Catal Hoyuk depict scenes, whereas the Paleolithic period, you're looking at basically a bunch of individual animals that are sort of randomly placed next to each other. Those images are not meant to be seen as a scene. But here we see a complete and complex narrative of a hunt. We see these sort of stick figures, which are shown with their heads generally in profile, but their chests are shown facing us, with their legs in profile. So this is a concept we've already seen with the bulls of some of the Paleolithic cave art, in that this is a composite figure with the head shown in profile and the chest shown from the front. This is, once again, that conceptual image. This is how we conceive of the human body. When we think of a chest, we think of it facing us. When we think of a head, we often think of it in profile, because that is the most descriptive way to think of it. And you can see that also in the image of the deer. While the deer's body is in profile, the antlers are shown as if we are facing it directly. So what we are seeing here is a significant change from Paleolithic art. We are seeing a scene where humans and the deer and animals interact. We're seeing a much larger group of human beings than we ever saw depicted in the Paleolithic era. In fact, Paleolithic images of humans tend to be rare. When we get to the Neolithic, they tend to be ubiquitous. They're everywhere. Another significant image from Catal Hoyuk is this landscape, arguably the first landscape painting in history. You are looking at also a composite landscape image. You can see Catal Hoyuk itself, the city, seen from above, so you get sort of this bird's eye view of the city. But in the distance, you see a double volcano, which is geographically accurate in the distance, but it is seen as if viewed from straight on, with smoke erupting from the mouths of one of the volcanoes. So, this is a society that would have spent a lot of time on top of their city. This would have been arguably one of the most common views of the city. If you're entering your homes from above, if you're congregating on top of the city from above, this is how you would view your city. So it makes sense that the artist here depicted their city from a kind of bird's eye or top-down view. But whereas the volcano would have been seen in the distance, from a sort of straight-on view, this is what we're getting. Catal Hoyuk represents significant changes between the Paleolithic and Neolithic era. We start to see settlements, we start to see structured societies, we start to see permanent dwellings, and along with that we see the expansion of artistic devices, images, sculptures that go along with that.